Hello, today is Thursday, April 3rd, 2025. I just stopped reading this article yesterday, but I'm going to read it for you and me today. This article is from Reuters.com, the famous news agency, and the subject is For China and US Inc. Trump's trade war feels much worse this time. This article is by Casey Hall and James Promfet, right? It is called Byline because it's by, right? It's Byline. March 30th, 31st, 2025, updated 2 years ago. By the way, I always read an English article and post it on YouTube as part of my effort to keep up with my English and also practice English by reading an English article. Since I am not a native speaker, I need to practice English on a daily basis. The caption under the photo says, employees work with sewing machines on the production line of the Midnight Charm garment lingerie factory in Guanyun County of Lianyungang, Jiangsu Province, right? Lianyungang, Lianyungang, China, November 25th, 25. Summary: more manufacturers quit China as tariffs crimp already razor-thin margins. U.S. Buyers. U.S. buyers press for 10% price cuts. Chinese companies push back. China's cash-strapped local governments struggling to help, right? So more manufacturers quit China as tariffs crimp already razor-thin margins. U.S. buyers press for 10% price cuts. Chinese companies push back. China's cash-strapped local governments struggling to help. Shanghai, March 31st. Orders have evaporated for Richard Chen, who manufactures Christmas decorations in southern China for U.S. retailers, including Walmart and Costco, facing crippling U.S. tariffs. The orders are half of what they were last year, said Chen, who is based in the manufacturing hub of Dongguan. The Reuters Tariff Watch newsletter is your daily guide to the latest global trade and tariffs news. This is a small inline advertisement by Reuters. He is now in survival mode. There's no more scope to cut prices, but to get orders, we sometimes have to take a price cut. We have no choice, Chen said. Declining, right? What's that? Declining to elaborate on cuts he had agreed to. We are losing money. On February 4th, U.S. President Donald Trump applied a new 10% tariff to the $400 billion worth of Chinese goods exported annually to the United States, with an additional 10% tariff announced on March 4th, and further reciprocal tariffs expected on April 2nd. Chinese suppliers and their American clients are now coming to grips with the grim reality that this trade war will hit harder than in Trump's first term in 2018. This time is different because low-end manufacturers are already struggling with razor-thin margins, so they cannot cut prices to help their U.S. customers. And local Chinese governments that might have provided support to protect jobs are mostly too cash-strapped to give new subsidies. Thin margins. Suppliers estimate wages have grown by 2 to 5% since the first U.S.-China trade war of 2018, while raw material costs have climbed for some sectors and overseas competition has intensified, making Trump's latest tariffs the final straw for many low-end manufacturers. Liz Piccarazzi, the Brooklyn-based founder and CEO of trash box company City Bin, said her goods produced in China are now subject to 52.5% tariffs, and she can no longer afford to manufacture there. My whole business has been based on a long-term rate of 7.5%. It's been a real shock, she said, referring to 2 rounds of 10% tariff increases on Chinese goods, in addition to a global 25% aluminum tariff. So that's 45%. 45 plus 7.5% is 52.5%. We knew this was coming, but there's no way any company can mitigate an additional 45% in tariffs. U.S. customers are pressing for 10% price cuts. According to interviews with 10 Chinese manufacturers and exporters and 2 U.S.-based retail executives with Chinese supply chain exposure, ongoing negotiations are yielding average discounts of 3 to 7% from suppliers, they said. You have companies in the U.S. who have hundreds of factories that work for them sending out a mass letter asking for a blanket 10% reduction from all suppliers on all products. 10% reduction, right? A blanket. That's good. A blanket 10% reduction from all suppliers on all products. Jonathan Chitayat, Jonathan Chitayat, the Asia boss of Gemimax Group, a contract manufacturer for a range of products that drives 70% of its revenue from U.S. customers. Most people don't have 10% to give, to be honest. Maybe they can do it for 1 or 2 orders, but 7% seems to be the ceiling for most people. Walmart and Costco did not reply to requests for comment on this story. When previously asked by Reuters about their negotiations with suppliers since the imposition of new tariffs, Walmart supplied a statement that said, "We will continue to work closely with them to find the best way forward during these uncertain times." Okay, so here he said, you have companies in the U.S. who have hundreds of factories, they work for them, sending out a mass letter asking for a blanket 10% reduction from all suppliers on all products, right? 10% cost reduction is much more better explanation. On the Chinese side, suppliers who got burned in 2018 when some U.S. customers refused to pay for container loads of goods subjected to higher tariffs are now asking for payments upfront rather than waiting 30 to 90 days after sending an invoice. We told our U.S. clients as soon as Trump got elected that the payment terms were 100% upfront with a purchase order because we anticipated this tariff nightmare, said Dominic Desmarais, Chief Solutions Officer at LIA Solutions, which connects small and medium-sized companies with suppliers in China, making everything from toys to furniture and titanium products upfront. Payment terms were 100% upfront. Job cuts loom. The tariffs have rattled China's industrial heartland and could lead to substantial layoffs as factories shutter or downsize. Analysts and manufacturers say. He-Ling Shi, an economics professor at Monash University in Melbourne, said Chinese manufacturers are succumbing to a wide range of pressures. I have noticed that quite a lot of enterprises have already decided to close their doors, she said. Academic research from Stanford University following 2018 showed that each 1% tariff rise impacted Chinese supplier margins by 0.35%. That trade war also resulted in the loss of around 3.5 million Chinese manufacturing jobs, according to Reuters calculations based on Dartmouth estimates of the percentage of manufacturing jobs China lost. 3.5 million Chinese manufacturing jobs are gone. That's terrible. Analysts say it's too early to estimate what the toll will be this time around. Some U.S. customers believe Chinese authorities will step in to support their local manufacturing industries with additional tax rebates, rent, and utility subsidies or other support as they have done in the past, including in 2018. I have been on hundreds, maybe thousands of Chinese factory visits, and understanding how important these factories are to a local government, there will absolutely be support when push comes to shove, said one US-based retail executive who declined to be named because he was not authorized to speak with the media. Right here it says, I have been on hundreds, maybe thousands of Chinese factory visits, right? And when push comes to shove, several suppliers interviewed by Reuters said so far, their support has not been forthcoming. Right here it says, so far, their support has not been forthcoming. Economics professor Shi said the heavy debt loads are local governments, many weighed down by an ongoing property crisis, will prevent them from being as generous with subsidies as they have been in the past. If there's no money in their pocket, how can they provide any subsidies, he said, adding that any move that put them deeper in debt would not be welcomed by China's central government. The message from Beijing is that exporters can pivot to other markets and China's own 1.4 billion customers, but that too is a difficult strategy in a time of overcapacity and depressed domestic demand. Right, that's a good expression. Exporters can pivot to other markets. Right, overcapacity and depressed domestic demand. China's own 1.4 million customers, but that too is a difficult strategy in a time of overcapacity and depressed domestic demand. While one of the stated aims of Trump's tariff regime is to draw manufacturing back to the U.S., Citibank's Piccarazzi says she has looked into the possibility at least half a dozen times and it remains unfeasible from a cost and quality perspective. For now, as she prepares to move 100% of her manufacturing to Vietnam, she says she has already advised her customers to expect higher prices. This is just a really unfair thing for the American government to do to American companies and American consumers, she said. There's no patriotism in ruining American companies. Reported by Casey Hall in Shanghai and James Promfett in Hong Kong. Additional reporting by Alan Zhang in Beijing, editing by Anne-Marie Rowntree and Sonali Paul. Our standards, the Thomson Reuters Trust Principles. Casey Hall, so that is a good article. Now go to the biopsy. A biblical biography of the writers. Casey has reported on China's consumer culture from her base in Shanghai for more than a decade, covering what Chinese consumers are buying and the broader social and economic trends driving those consumption trends. The Australian-born journalist has lived in China since 2007, 18 years, right? James Promfett, Thomson Reuters. James Promfett is a special correspondent for Reuters covering politics and policy in Asia, with a specialization on China, Hong Kong, and Taiwan. Two-time Pulitzer finalist, his multimedia career has spanned print, radio, TV, and photography. His reporting includes The Revolt of Hong Kong, an investigative series he helped lead that was a Pulitzer finalist for international reporting in 2020, and series on China's weaponization of the rule of law against the critics that won a 2023 SOPA award, weaponization of rule of law, right? Weaponization of rule of law. Here. Weaponization of rule of law against its critics that won a 2023 SOPA award. So basically, a tariff, 1% tariff impacts Chinese manufacturer by 0.35%, right? It's a terrible, and China already lost about 3.5 million jobs, and their economy is depressed. But the Chinese central government wants the Chinese exporters to pivot to other markets in time of but that's a difficult strategy because it's a domestic market is experiencing overcapacity and demand is depressed. But before I close this article for the day, let's go over the summary again. More manufacturers quit China as tariffs crimp already razor-thin margins. U.S. buyers press for 10% price cuts. Chinese companies push back 3 to 7%. China's cash-strapped local governments struggling to help. No subsidy, not supportive.